All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to our final session of the day. It is 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So welcome again if you're just joining us for the first time to the second Kentucky Summit on Economic Development Strategies to Leverage Kentucky's Riverports and Freight Network. This session will start in just a couple minutes. We're going to let some folks continue to slip in here for another minute or so. I know it takes about a good half a minute just to sign into Zoom. So we'll just wait one more minute. And while we're doing that, go ahead and just make sure you're on mute, and thank you for your patience. Again, just give us about 30 more seconds as I can see some more people are jumping in right now. So just 30 more seconds and we'll get started. Thank you. All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us again. We'll just go ahead and get started with some of the housekeeping items while some others join us. As you can see, that last session was really hot, so I had to take my coat off. But Ken Erickson and his panel provided some really good insights into some of the modal diversification that has to and looks like it will be occurring in the future, and the ways that investment on the ports can help drive some of that into the rail and waterway connections. So that with that intro, I'd like to kind of go through the Zoom tips just real quickly. We have obviously at the bottom left-hand side, we have the mute button. So make sure that you're muted unless you plan to speak. If you'd like to ask a question, we have the chat box right there button in the middle with the cloud. And that would provide us with some any questions, or if you have an issue or problem, just reach out and ask for Haley or Rebecca in that group chat. Also, if your view is messed up, use the little tic-tac-toe box or little set of squares up in the upper right-hand corner to change your view. So we are in the final session of the day. It's our 6th session. The session is on port infrastructure needs in Kentucky's funding process. This session is going to be presented to you by Lindsay Hoskins. And Lindsay is a transportation engineer at QK4, currently serving as a team member to help deliver this important Riverport freight planning study. Lindsay started her career at the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet as a scholarship student, rotating through various departments over the course of her 5 years there, and her most recent position in the Division of Program Management. So Lindsay brings a really good background working directly with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and pass the baton on to you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Jimmy. Good afternoon, all. I'm excited to be presenting on KYTC's funding processes, which include the 6-year highway plan and SHIFT, a process that prioritizes projects to best utilize the limited transportation dollars available. Following my presentation, we're going to do breakout sessions into smaller groups of 3 to 4 ports to review infrastructure needs that you all have to support the movement of freight around your ports, and allow you another opportunity to identify additional infrastructure needs that we may not have captured to date. So let's talk about funding first to get a background understanding to know where all of this really comes from. At KYTC, the Division of Program Management is responsible for preparing the programming documents for authorization of state and federal funding for all phases of KYTC projects. But that's not all they do. Next slide. The Division of Program Management is also responsible for this long list, which includes developing the 6-year highway plan, developing the statewide transportation improvement program, providing web-based location maps of 6-year plan projects, preparing federal discretionary funding applications, and developing ad hoc special reports for congressional members, the governor, Kentucky legislators, FHWA, the Secretary of Transportation, Commissioner, the districts, and central office, as well as handling open records requests. They also process requests for state and federal funding and prepare authorization documents for those requests. And they monitor those projects expenditures for cash flow balances and to make sure they're meeting the federal requirements of those dollars. So now that we have a high level understanding of what the division, all that the division does, how are these projects funded? Next slide. KYTC transportation roadway projects are funded through different programs within the cabinet, and the type of funding used depends on the program in which this project activity is conducted. Projects funded through these programs must come through the 6-year highway plan process, which is approved by the Kentucky General Assembly, including state and federally funded projects. The Federal Aid Highway Program, which we can see over here on the far right, includes a lot of funding opportunities. It's a reimbursement program, which means project expenditures must be first paid with state funds, and then they get reimbursed for eligible costs of those projects. Most of these programs also require a federal or local match, which is typically a percentage of the overall project costs, and that percentage varies by program type. Typically, it's an 80-20 with the state paying 20%. Some safety projects can be as high as 90-10. It just varies based on that federal program. And then our state funding in Kentucky is provided through the State Road Fund. And that's for normal maintenance activities and operations throughout the entire Commonwealth for state high priority projects, and then also as federal match. So there's a lot of needs and potential funding programs, but how do we determine which programs, how funding gets programmed? Next slide. Funding programs first get identified in the 6-year plan process. It's required by Kentucky Revised Statute, Chapter 176, and it's a 6-year plan for major highway improvement project phases scheduled for the next 6 fiscal years. And this process of developing the 6-year highway plan occurs every 2 years. So essentially KYTC operates on a biennium. They submit to the General Assembly in February of even number years a recommended highway plan containing a listing of proposed projects to include the scheduled project phases, proposed type of funding, scheduled fiscal year, and the estimated cost of corresponding project phases. The General Assembly then reviews those projects identified in the recommended highway plan, and they may make revisions to the projects, they may add projects, they may even remove projects before we get to an enacted highway plan. So approval of the highway plan is normally in April of even number years. So ours just came out in 2020, and it also depends upon, but timing also depends upon approval of the state budget by the General Assembly. So let's take a quick look at funding obligations in our current 6-year highway plan. Next slide. The 2020 enacted highway plan is based on a total revenue of $6.1 billion, consisting of $1.1 billion to address the backlog of pavement and bridge needs, $0.9 billion in federally dedicated funds, and another $500 million for federal Garvey debt service payments. Beyond these obligations, there is $3.6 billion left for highway project funding through fiscal year 2026. The enacted highway plan consists of funding in our biennium for projects to address bridge and pavement needs, a new guardrail program, critical roadway safety improvements, ferry boats, and to provide required state and federal funding for committed USDOT build and infra grant projects. This chart shows how those dollars are planned to be programmed by year, broken down by federal, state priority projects, state match for federal projects, and local match for federal projects. As we can see, the majority of our transportation dollars are allocated through these federal programs, and another large portion of our state funding is the match to those projects. So let's take a look at how those federal dollars are obligated in our current plan. Next slide. This table shows the anticipated federal funding target amounts used to fiscally balance the plan. According to these estimates of category by category funding expectations, the anticipated total federal aid dollars and matching funding available to fund projects scheduled in the plan for fiscal year 2020 through 2026 is expected to be about $5.2 billion. Beginning in fiscal year 2020, KYTC exhausted its toll credits and was required to provide state matching funds for federal aid highway funding each fiscal year. This will require KYTC to commit approximately $343 million of state road funds in the biennium and approximately $849 million of state road funds in the following 4 years to provide required matching funds to use available federal highway dollars. The required state matching funds will be part of the overall project budget to cover federal project expenditures. So how does KYTC identify what projects are included in the 6-year highway plan now that we see the high numbers that we're working with? Next slide. That's determined through SHIFT. This is a process. It stems from the Strategic Highway Investment Formula for Tomorrow. It's KYTC's data-driven objective approach to compare capital improvement projects and prioritize the limited transportation funds for 6-year plan inclusion. Next slide, please. So why SHIFT? Well, KYTC is responsible for managing and maintaining over 27,500 miles of roadway and 14,349 bridges. Kentucky is the 9th largest state road system and the 7th largest inventory of state maintained bridges in the country. So those limited dollars available really have to stretch, which is why we're talking to you about your infrastructure needs surrounding the ports later in our breakout sessions following this presentation. For a project to eventually receive funding and be able to advance, the need must first be identified to be able to be considered during the development of the 6-year highway plan. So this SHIFT prioritization process is important because it helps reduce overprogramming. It provides a clear roadmap for construction and applies to all transportation funding that isn't prioritized by other means. Projects that would be prioritized by other means would include maintenance work, local government projects, and dedicated federal projects. Next slide. So what is this prioritization process? Well, projects are scored based on 5 key attributes. Those are safety, asset management, congestion, economic growth, and benefit cost. It uses measurable data to assess the need for and benefits of planned projects and compare them to each other. So how does that work? Next slide, Jimmy. It all starts with a list, which can come from planning studies, which is why we're going to be asking you about your list. KYTC starts with a list of previously identified state and local transportation leader projects. Those local entities include area development districts and metropolitan planning organizations and even KYTC districts. These leaders can add or subtract projects at this stage. Immediately following is sponsorship. Projects must be sponsored to move forward or be committed projects. Committed projects are those listed in previous state highway plans with funding beyond the design phase. Each ad, MPO, and district are allocated a number of sponsorships based on population, lane miles, number of counties served. After consulting with local officials, transportation leaders choose which projects to sponsor. Next is projects each get reviewed and scored on a scale of 0 to 100 with a formula that uses objective measures for those 5 key attributes we just learned about on the previous slide. Projects of statewide significance, interstates, parkways, and other major connecting routes are scored first. The remaining projects, known as regional projects, are scored using a similar formula. KYTC identifies the top scoring statewide projects, and about 1/3 are selected for priority funding. The remaining statewide projects are considered during the next phase, which is local boosting. Local transportation leaders take the lead role in prioritizing regional priorities, which include highways and local roads, as well as remaining statewide projects. Using local insights, ads, MPOs, and those KYTC districts may boost the scores for their top priority projects, adding 15 points to their base scores. And projects that are both boosted by the district and the ad or MPO can receive an additional 30 points, also known as a turbo boost. Kentucky is divided into 4 geographic regions, as we can see on the right side of the slide, each containing 3 contiguous KYTC districts. Each region gets an equal allocation of funds. The top ranking projects in each region are the priorities considered in drafting the state highway plan. KYTC combines the statewide and regional priorities to help develop the governor's recommended state highway plan, which is presented to the Kentucky General Assembly. And during the legislative session, lawmakers fine-tune that plan based on additional information and funding availability. The result is the enacted highway plan, which includes 2 years of funded projects and spending priorities for the following 4 years, which is what KYTC operates under. Next slide. The 6-year plan was just enacted spring of 2020, and the shift process for 2022 recommended highway plan is already underway. The shift process this go around includes several refinements to scoring metrics and the prioritization process based on feedback and experience. And the one before this was the 2018, and from the 2018 to 2020, there were also refinements. Just as you learn, you do better. So as we can see in the table, which shows the timeline of actions for Shift 2022, sponsorship is already underway and should be wrapping up mid-May. Next slide. So as we just learned, the shift process starts with a list. So to make sure this planning study effectively identifies infrastructure needs surrounding the ports, we're going to break out into smaller groups to hear more from you. Next slide. Before we do that, we're going to review what we've done to date to learn more about your infrastructure needs. So starting in late 2020, the project team has been working to identify infrastructure needs in the surrounding Riverport communities to support the movement of freight. Specifically, 2 unique questionnaires were distributed to KYTC district offices and local stakeholders to gain input on highways, rail, and water-related infrastructure issues affecting Riverport access. Collectively, we heard your top needs to be increased funding for grants that support Riverports. This includes support for domestic and international freight movement and infrastructure development, stable funding operations and infrastructure, specifically funding for aged infrastructure, improving locks and container on barge initiatives would be beneficial, and river channel maintenance and dredging needs were also cited. And your third top need was marketing support of property and services on a regional, national, and international platform. The ports experience competition between private, public, and neighboring state riverports. Next slide. So to allow you another opportunity to identify these infrastructure needs and to reach a larger audience of summit attendees and to capture any new needs that may have come to mind after learning from our 2 previous sessions today of how our forecast may be shifting where freight's going, we're going to break out into regional groups here in just a minute to review some maps that we have identified, your needs that you've voiced to us to date. And then there's going to be 3 questions for each port to answer, which are listed here. And we're just showing them to you so you have a few moments to ponder, get those wheels turning. And just for your information, our project team will be scheduling a second round of port visits in case you haven't been in any of our previous sessions where we've mentioned that. We wanted to make sure you knew that we will be going back out there on the ground to listen to you and give you another opportunity to share your needs and concerns with us. But before we break out, let's walk through what to expect in case you haven't participated in a Zoom breakout room before. Next slide. There are going to be 3 groups with 3 to 4 ports per group, and each group will have 20 minutes. So that's about 5 minutes per port. A consultant team member is going to be running the session by sharing their screen that has maps with the needs we've identified to date, reviewing the questions with you and taking notes to make sure your needs are properly accounted for. So after 20 minutes has elapsed, each participant will receive a prompt to return to the main meeting space. This will appear as a 1-minute countdown. If discussion is complete, you can go ahead and hit enter to return. If not, you're going to automatically be pulled back into the larger group once that timer hits 0. Next slide. So the ports are broken out kind of into regionally. We put developing in their own group. So for our West group, it includes Eddyville, Henderson, Hickman, Fulton, and Paducah, McCracken. I'm going to be leading that session with Kevin. Next is the Central East area-ish, which has Owensboro, Louisville, and Greenup Boyd. Rebecca and Ken will be in that session. And then the developing ports, which are West Kentucky Regional, Meade, Northern Kentucky, and Maysville Mason, are going to be led by Tom and Jimmy. So all of you should have the option which breakout room you would like to attend. Moderators and port directors and other port representatives, please select your appropriate breakout room so we can make sure we're capturing the appropriate feedbacks in each room. If there's time at the end, we'll answer any questions that you may have once we're pulled back as a group together. If we can't get to them all, we're going to be sure to include the answers to your questions as a follow-up to the summit. So Haley, we are ready for these breakout rooms. It looks like we are all trickling back in here. We'll give everyone a couple more seconds. And then we'll field any additional questions you all may have. If there aren't any, maybe you all get an early start to your Thursday afternoon.
That was abrupt, Lindsay.
What?
All right, so we're back in the full group here. Robin, I would love to get in touch with you. Sorry we ended early, but to get that information on Northern Kentucky, just to say that real quickly. So we'll reach out to you and make sure we get that information put on our map too. I apologize for that. So is everybody back together now? Anybody?
Looks like everybody's back in the main room.
All right. Just give me 1 second here because I was in a session sharing a different screen, so I need to jump back and share one that we just had. So give me 1 second here. Is it sharing?
Yes, it is.
All right, I think we're back together as a group here. And we had several breakout sessions. We were having a pretty good discussion in ours. We didn't have quite enough time to get to everybody, so I don't know how all the other sessions went, but we would definitely like to have the opportunity to get some more information from each of the represented facilities and their plans for infrastructure improvements. That opportunity, a second opportunity, really third, including this one, is coming shortly. Ken Erickson and myself will be reaching out to each of the port facilities and their stakeholders to schedule some visits in late April. So we're hoping to be able to reach out to each of you to schedule that and to be able to really sit down and understand your capital improvement programs, your investment needs, both short term, long term, and then the funded and unfunded needs as well, which we, as you've heard from several of the different groups throughout the day, talk about how important it is to have those lists. And Lindsay kind of highlighted that at the beginning of her presentation as well, how important it is to have that list collectively as the Kentucky Riverports, so that all the funding pots become an eligible scenario from a statewide perspective. So that's kind of one of the things that we're really going to drive home here in the coming weeks to get together, things that overlap, the things that collectively can advance the ports from a state perspective. So I'm at the end here where we have opportunity for some questions related to these. So Lindsay, do you want to just open it up for everybody to be able to ask questions related to their sessions?
Certainly. If you all have any questions, feel free to ask them now in the chat pod, or take yourself off mute and show your face and let us know you're ready to speak. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hey, just a general question. Do we have anybody following legislature stuff? And I guess in particular, historically we've had these problems with constitutional prohibition on spending gas tax dollars on non-road issues. Does anybody have any feeling for where the legislature might be going or might be willing to go over the next few sessions, where they might reconsider that, given that they're going to be kind of shifting in with respect to trying to figure out some alternative as opposed to gas tax. So that's my general question. Someone's got a better one, throw it out there.
I do not know the answer to that question, but I'll be happy to reach out to KYTC and others who may know the answer to that question and get back with you.
Greg,
Great.
Representative Sal Santoro has filed a bill the past couple sessions to create a multimodal fund that would allow for investment in all different modes, and it has not gotten any traction. It was filed in this session as well, and it has not gotten any traction. So he's making efforts to create a multimodal fund, but that has not received much attention.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And Greg, just to let you know, one of the things that will be in our funding analysis is a discussion on some of the next steps that we believe the ports could take collectively that would help them to both, hopefully be able to find innovative ways to find funding within the state of Kentucky, but also with other agencies, both federal and utilizing economic development. You'll hear a little bit more about that tomorrow in tomorrow's session on the economic development strategies. But the idea is that we will give you a list of things, strategies, and objectives that the ports should take, and really, you're going to have to take those and really buy into them and try to exploit them to do things like what you were just asking about, finding ways to either raise the issue in the state to where it becomes an institutionalized program, or finding those dollars maybe on a year-to-year basis that are specific for the ports. But they have to have something to throw. They have to have a dartboard to throw the darts at, and that's what we're trying to develop here in the study. And that's why it's so important we come out here the coming weeks for you all to give us a real list. And I know some of that's depending on market shift, depending on the future, but we need to know, the list of things that you plan to do now, regardless of the future. We need to know the things that you would do if different alternatives of the future occurred. And so that, and I know a lot of that's variable, but that's why we want the funded and unfunded needs. That's why we want to look at all the different scenarios that you all are kind of planning. And some of them I understand are very much you want to keep them too close to the chest and not let others know that they're competitive. So we get that. So we're going to try our best to lay it all out and show you the areas that you guys can work together on.
Yeah, Greg, this is Ken. When the ASC, the American Society of Civil Engineers came out with a report earlier this month, which is very timely ahead of the administration's infrastructure week, if you will, or revealing of their plan. One of the components about under the port area specifically, as kind of what it takes to raise the grade, if you will, was to remove those multimodal caps on and increase overall investment in the infra plan and the build program. So while that's just a recommendation and suggestion, that's something I think all of us agree with, that you've got to be looking at this from a multimodal perspective. Now the question is how much legs does this get behind it to move forward here? So I think it's a great question. It's an ongoing challenge, unfortunately. It gets so, and I think we came out of our session we just had, you're kind of the last one to be heard as Riverports and waterways and rivers among many fundings, even at your local level. So to be able to get a seat at the table is bad enough, let alone to try to get some of those things loosened up a bit.
Yeah, if I could add to Greg's comment, and maybe Jeremy, maybe you could kind of guide me on an answer. This is probably no, but I mean, if a port can prove that you're saving money on road repairs because you're transferring it from the road long distance, let's just say right now that you have a commodity that's moving 25 miles on the roadway versus moving 3 miles to a river port. I mean, any way we can get credit for that added from the highway tax or whatever it is the savings, and move that forward to expand to the Riverport side itself?
No, it has to be a direct investment in the road. I mean, it's understood that the Riverport and using the waterway has benefits to the road by taking traffic off. The same with using rail can take, you know, some of the traffic off of the roads, but it is a strict prohibition against using it and spending on anything other than roads. Now, there was some successful legal maneuvering that got runways classified as roads. I don't know how that worked out, but supposedly the runways at airports are roads or extensions of roads. But the money has to directly be spent for improvement of roads.
Jeremy, are on-port roads considered local roadways? And I'm sure it's different for each facility, but could they be designated, you know, in a way that they could, that at least the facilities in internal roadway networks could be part of a state repairs or state roadway systems? Is there a way to look at that or think about that, or is it already occurring?
A lot of them
Just so that
are
that
on county roads or on city roads. But I mean, once you get into a port facility, especially if it becomes, you know, inside of gates, then that becomes a private, even though it's a publicly owned facility, it is not a publicly accessible road. So,
Right.
I mean, maintenance funds could be used probably up to the gates, but anything inside of that becomes, you know, it's not a publicly accessible area.
Hey, Jeremy, this is Mike Onder. Can we explore this a little bit more? Because it's my understanding that any transportation corridor that moves traffic, especially as we're talking about trucks, off the other highways and roadways, if you are able to do that and explain that properly, that you can move your highway trust funds to the facility that is accomplishing that. I think we need to explore that, because that, to my knowledge, is something that's available in Title 23 under the federal law. I don't mean to, you know, have any kind of open discussion here on it, but I'm just saying, I don't want the person who asked that question to walk away thinking that, no, there's no possibility of doing that, because I think there may be.
We can explore that. I mean, there's different options. You know, if a facility is considered an intermodal connector, an intermodal facility, Federal Highways does have a program called Intermodal Connectors that allows for funding to help improve access between that facility and to the national highway system. There is those funds that can be spent, and then the state does receive an apportionment of National Highway Freight Program funds, of which up to 10% can be pulled off for non-highway modes. That is a federal program that's allowed. Now, Kentucky historically has not done that. It would be about $2 million a year. Some states have set that up as a competitive grant program to get access to those funds. I know Illinois has done that. Iowa has done that. Kentucky has not. It does require a much higher level of effort because those are federal funds, and talking with my counterparts in Iowa, because they're federal funds, it has actually discouraged a lot of applicants for those funds because they don't want to deal with the federal nature of those funds. So there are some small programs that may allow it, but as far as using state funds, they can only be spent for road purposes by our Constitution.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm not talking about state funds. I was talking about federal funds. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was scribbling some notes down. And is there any other questions while we have about 6 more minutes of time, or we could just have kind of an open forum here? Any other questions related to funding or innovative thoughts on funding, or or infrastructure needs that you may have for a facility in your region?
Jimmy, let me just clarify one thing that Joe Crabtree threw out. What I'm talking about is state road funds. General funds from the state can be used for whatever the heck the legislature wants to spend them on. So if the Riverport wants to go after general funds, they can do that. What I was referencing was state road funds, just so I'm clear.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, and there's several different funding pots that, and like I said, tomorrow there's going to be some more discussion on this. And there's innovative ways to maybe leverage some of that. And so that's kind of some of the things we'll try and get into a lot more tomorrow, and that we'll continue to get into in the study as we develop that portion of the study. But like I said, I would really encourage y'all to just provide those infrastructure needs, those projects, both funded, both planned, and then the ones that are not funded as well, just so that we have a complete list going forward. I think you heard yesterday, I don't remember if it was Ohio or Illinois, but they said they had 25 million in unfunded project needs above their funded projects. But because they know that, they have the ask amount, right? They have what they need to go to the state and go to the feds to ask for. And that's what we're really important that we get this situation. So any other questions? I didn't see it. I'm trying to make sure I look in the chat here real quick. Is there any from the chat box that folks might be asking?
Yep. Yeah, I'm on another meeting, but anyway, I'll
All right. I do see one. Just 1 second. It's Robin asks, okay, I served as a public advocate for FRA and Kytc funding last year for 2 of the Ohio side barge terminal operators to improve railroad intermodal access and safety, and also MARAD. Robin, did you want to expound on that a little bit, or did you just?
I was just pointing out that there's lots of federal funds that we heard about yesterday. There's other sources besides the roadway funds. I know the challenges in the Commonwealth, but I was trying to share how we at the MPO level we've used. I also had I was just sharing everyone CMAQ funds. We've used CMAQ to do railroad and barge terminal improvements, and we've always tied it back to removing trucks from the roads and air quality, environmental improvements. So that's CMAQ funds, congestion mitigation, air quality. For those who don't know, it's a federal highway funding program. So
Thank you, Robin.
Anyway, that's just all the different sources available.
Robin is very successful at getting federal funds through every different mode. So if you've got questions, ask Robin.
Thanks, Jeremy.
And Robin, like I said before, I'll make sure to reach out to you about the Northern Kentucky port, since we weren't able to talk about that in our breakout session. So thank you. And you're exactly right. There's a bunch of different funding pots out there, and I think infrastructure funding is, as you kind of heard in Ken's session just before this one, the current administration at the federal level is putting extra dollars into infrastructure development through various avenues of getting it. We were eagerly hoping to hear what was going to be happening with the Army Corps and with the other federal programs. But I think as we move into the early parts of this year, we're going to start seeing budgets come out that are more specific and that show that there's money, there's pots out there that we need to be organized, we need to be ready. And I think this plan is going to position many of you to be able to have that ammunition to go after those dollars, either collectively or individually from a local standpoint. And we'll also be looking at partnerships, looking at ways to leverage private investment dollars, and leverage the tools that can be provided, in combination with your economic development in your region. So you'll hear a lot more about that tomorrow. We encourage, I'm going to go ahead and just wrap us up here, unless there's anything that I missed or anything that anybody wants to have one last comment. But I think we're at our 4 o'clock time slot. So we're going to have a session starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow. It'll be our final session. It's a 2-hour session. They'll have the economic development and the Riverport markets description. And then we have a little bit of time with Jeremy and Chandler closing us out at the end, about the last 20-30 minutes of that session. So we hope that y'all would make it to that group and participate some more. We appreciate everybody's participation today. If you have any questions or needs related to technical stuff or questions related to presentations, feel free to reach out to myself, to Chandler, the project manager, or any of the other staff that you've seen helping out and presenting in this second Kentucky Summit for the Riverports. And of course, Jeremy's available if you have any questions that you want to relay through him. Please do that. We're eager to help out and just to find ways to provide answers and solutions. So if you did have questions in your breakout sessions that didn't get answered, please reach out to your representative that was leading that session. Or if you don't remember who that was, or don't have their contact information, again, reach out to myself or any of the other team members that are providing this summit to you today. So that being said, thank you very much. And y'all have a great afternoon, and look forward to seeing you in the morning.